It's not fair, really. If you think about it, it's one thing to be immensely talented at one creative endeavor. But nowadays, everyone's an overachiever, am I right? This is another installment of Drinking About Design, a journey into the less explored aspects of design, art, and architecture while drinking. This is so true. This installment is a fun one for a litany of reasons, and not just because we're drinking, but that doesn't hurt. Just to set the record straight and set the table for you, in the summer of 2020, the pandemic was in full effect. We were all locked in and trying to figure out what was going to happen next. You remember, you were there. You were doing the exact same thing. So, besides the day drinking and looking up old friends on Facebook, because I'm sure I wasn't the only one, I was trying to learn new ways to be socially engaged. One of the things I did during that time was binge watch drunk history. By the way, let me back up. What I'm about to tell you was not being socially engaged. It was about as isolated as one could possibly be. But as a side note, one of the things I did during that time was binge watch Drunk History, Dinner for Five, and Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown, as well as No Reservations Required. Groundbreaking shows that I never could find the time to binge watch before. I became enamored with the skill by which Anthony Bourdain found a complete language revolving around food and association to society. How Jon Favreau could take four celebrities and craft a vibrant tableau out of each of the stories shared around the table. How Derek Waters told stories through the honest interpretations of historical events, through the drunken lens of comics woven together as a tapestry featuring some of the funniest people alive. Then, all of a sudden, it was over. Things opened up all at once, and we all got busy. Really busy. I've been missing some of those evenings at the virtual bar. Well, let me back up. At the same time, I opened a virtual bar called Big D Energy. By the way, Big Design Energy for my hip hop loving friends. I wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea. But as everything opened, things opened up all at once, and we all got really busy. I missed those evenings at the Big D Energy. So I wanted to create something to relive that. Now, this installment is a fun one and features Michael Imber, Ankie Barnes, Steve Rugo, Tom Kligerman, and Douglas Wright. 5 architects, friends with a passion for whiskey and a love for painting in watercolor, as well as this architecture thing they do. Some are better at it than others. I'm talking about the painting. And I'm not going to say who, but they will. So anyway, these 5 creatives are extremely accomplished in their chosen profession. They're extraordinary talented artists and amazing architects. They are well-traveled. And we talk about this, gosh, and so much more. Welcome to the Big D Energy, a virtual pub at the sketchy outskirts of the internet. We're talking about art, architecture, travel, and having fun with a few pops amongst friends. Cozy up to the bar, grab a drink, and enjoy this conversation with the Whisky Watercolor Club. I love this too, because Steve's going to show up and we're going to be halfway through this. Oh, there he is. Hi, Steve.
I beat you,
All right. So here's the premise, and I will set the table accordingly for those listening or watching. This is a fun episode of Drinking About Design. As you may remember, I started this series because I am a huge fan of Anthony Bourdain's as well as Drunk History, as well as Table for Five with Jon Favreau. And beginning in the pandemic, during the pandemic, this kind of thing started where friends and I who were in the biz would just kind of get together on a Friday afternoon and drink well into the morning and, thinking about things. talking about things. And a couple of years later, so we got totally busy. Then I thought, you know what? I really want to do this again. This one is super fun. I have no idea where it's going to go. I'm going to set this thing up, though. The way I kind of established the premise for the show was I said, hey, I'm going to send you guys some ideas, and I would love for you to tell me the story. We're going to have some some pops, and we're going to drink a little bit, and you're going to tell me the story. And the response I got back was, yeah, no, we don't like that idea. No, that one doesn't work either. No, I really don't want to talk about that. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to be a bystander on this one. I'm gonna lead it loosely, but I have no idea where this is going. So first thing I want to do is I want to find out what everybody's drinking, and after that, I want you to tell me the story about the Whiskey Watercolor Club. Did I get that right? Whiskey Watercolor Club. Yeah. So I want you to tell me the story. But Michael, what are we drinking today?
I'm drinking Glengoyne.
Okay, you're purist. You're going simple.
Purist. I'm the only purist here, evidently.
Michael, rocks,
I love
no
it.
rocks, single rock.
On the rocks.
On the rocks.
All right, so you're almost a purist. You're almost a purist.
I can see how this is going to go. All right, Tom.
I made up a little concoction. I made an old fashioned out of Knob Creek, out of their fancy sort of, I forget what it is. It's one of the black label. I just found in the back of my liquor cabinet. It looked fancy. And I'm trying, instead of simple syrup, I'm trying agave syrup because I think I might have a slightly mellowing effect. Maraschino cherry, and I didn't have an orange peel, so I squished up a piece of tangerine and threw it in there, and it's pretty good.
Love it. Ankie?
Yeah, and beautiful. I have a version of an old fashioned as well, and mine is using the Irish Lambay whiskey from the island in Ireland that we were all on about 4 months ago. And instead of simple syrup, I'm using lavender honey mixed with water. I have one of those cherries, and 5 drops of bitters and a slice of orange peel.
Nice. Doug?
Well, as the youngest guy of the group, I'm not having an old fashioned. I scrambled and found some fantastic tequila, some Casamigos tequila and margarita mix in my office, which I'm very glad we have not a full bar, but a bit of a bar. And so I'm having a margarita.
Love it. Steve?
I'm going down a little different path, which is just straight up hollow spot Irish whiskey, because that's what was in the office, left over for something. So that was the or there was vodka.
I feel sorry for Doug and Steve who are in the office. Michael and I and Ankie are like at our summer houses or something.
I'm in the office, Tom, unfortunately.
That doesn't look like the office. That looks like a vacation place.
That's my office.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. So, in honor of you guys, I was trying something new. The whiskey's not new. Oak and Eden.
Oh, yeah.
Love this, and I was sharing this before. It's kind of a gimmicky thing, but it has a 5-inch spire of toasted oak in there. It's very, very good, kind of woodsy. And I found this. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before. Bitter milk.
No.
Number 6, which is the Oaxacan Old Fashioned. So I've got the Oak and Eden with a little bit of that. It's generally about 3 or 4 parts to 1, and then a twist of lime.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. It is absolutely. It's amazing. It's actually really good. Highly recommend it. Okay, so the Whiskey Watercolor Club. Who started this?
It was absolutely a joint effort, but
Yeah,
I know, but there's always a ringleader. There's always a ringleader.
Ankie's wife gets the credit for putting the idea together. You want to tell us about that, Ankie?
Yep. So we, 4 of us, I think, were on a trip to India looking at the architecture of Sir Edmund Lutyens when COVID hit. We got halfway through the trip and we all had to run home when the presidents of all the countries were closing the countries. We scrambled home, and we'd just been getting up every morning, sitting in front of a temple or a well and painting and sketching and carrying on and drinking together. And we were all in the doldrums as COVID closed us all down. And I was whining about it to my wife, Fran, and she said, well, what's wrong with you guys? You guys can paint together on Zoom. And so we decided to start our Sunday afternoon tradition. And I think that Tom came up with a name, right, Tom?
I think Michael came up with the name, because I had a good name in mind, but I think Michael ended up naming it. And I know it was Michael because he misspelled whiskey.
It depends on where you are, Tom.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
The other thing I'd like to add, I think we initially get together just to talk. I don't think we initially intended to paint. I think at the end we said, hey, why don't we meet a week later? This was great, and maybe we could do something.
But also remember, it wasn't just Sunday afternoons. I think early on when the pandemic hit, we were painting randomly, like in the evenings, Wednesdays. Not only were we painting sort of, 3 in the afternoon in the middle of the week on Wednesdays, we were drinking at 3 in the afternoon on Wednesdays, which was one of the silver linings of COVID.
Well, and the other thing that was really fun that we were doing was texting. We very quickly formed a text group, and it has the little icon of a whiskey in a glass as well. But we would start sending pictures throughout the day, like, oh, let's paint this, let's try this. And, there'd be whole comments about, oh, that sky's too difficult. Or, Michael, of course, knew how to paint it. None of us did, but, figured it out.
So it started out, I guess, as a therapy session.
Yeah.
Therapy with art.
Using alcohol to solve all our problems.
Yep.
And ended up turning into a painting session.
Yeah. But in a way, it is a painting session, and not to get too sort of, emotional, but it has become a really good friends group also.
Definitely.
And so I think if we don't get a chance to paint, we can fall back on drinking and or just having a conversation. And we're having these ridiculous texts. I mean, I open my phone and it says something like 54 texts, and one is from like my daughter, and 53 are from these guys.
But even better, like, I have a teenage daughter, and I would have more text notifications on my phone than she did.
And you couldn't show her any of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I would say they're pretty G-rated. I think they're PG or G.
Definitely.
So let me back up a second.
Yeah.
When did the painting start? I'm curious as to the origin of it, because I think it's really interesting to have creatives who are exceptional at what they do professionally to take on a side creative activity for the purpose of pleasure. Is, because none of you, and listen, maybe you guys consider yourselves professional artists, and if you do, that's wonderful. But I mean, it sounds like this is something that is part therapy, part hobby, part camaraderie.
It's more than that, because architects have always drawn, and we've always considered it an important part of who we are. Yeah, but the problem is we're all busy, and we've kind of shoved that aside for running our offices and the everyday life of the profession. And I think we were all going over for a trip to England and staying at one of Lutyens' houses, Goddard's. And I don't know whose idea it was, but somebody said, maybe Tom said, let's all bring our paints. And so we all brought our paints over, and we ended up sitting out on the lawn. There was frost on the bushes and frost on the paper. It's cold. Yeah. But we just enjoyed doing it together. And so
we were out at like 5:30, 6 in the morning before the regular trip would start.
Yeah. And so then we'd end up in the kitchen, drinking and painting at 6 in the morning.
Well, we were drinking tea and coffee at 6 in the morning.
Well,
we don't want to get a bad reputation.
You were drinking tea.
Yeah. Spike.
But then
a little late for that, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
little late for that. So I find that really interesting. Now, how does that affect what you do now? Because I imagine, as tight as this group is, you've been doing this for a couple of years now. So this has got to be something that is of primary importance to what you guys, it's part of life now.
Well, we've gotten better at one or the other, drinking or watercolor. Yeah, it depends on who we are.
Well, I would say that here's the difference between all of us and Michael Ember. Michael Ember's been doing this since he was like 3, because his aunt was a painter, maybe his grandmother. There's the rest of us, at least I speak for myself. I only started this right around the time we started going to, on these trips, which is about 2019. So, but to your point, I think we are getting better. At least I like to think we are. And but it's something that has come relatively recently to me. But I have to say that it is. And
it shows. It shows in his work, Josh.
No, you started at the American Academy in Rome, right?
That's right. I went to the American Academy in Rome. One of the things I wanted to do is learn how to watercolor. So I did start then. But really, the improvement has come with repetition, but also with working with, painting with these guys, and learning most from when they're the meanest to me, which is pretty often. I'm learning a lot.
We're pretty honest with one another.
When does that ever happen to you, Tom?
The other thing I'll add too is I think we started painting. We absolutely were aware of where we were in terms of learning, and I think we were respectful to each other, but suggested ways of improving. But the more we did, and the better we got at painting skies or rocks or trees or landscapes or whatever they were, I think we'd each venture into architecture, which is very different from painting landscapes. But also there were moments, when I would paint a expressive architecture piece and Tom said, "That's great. You should show that to a client, or I'd love to show something like that to a client." And that made me feel great. And it also made me think, maybe I will. It might be the client Tom wants to poach, so like he wants me to show this hideous architecture piece. Just kidding. But no, that was a confidence builder. And I think there was a lot of that too, which was great.
Well, and there were moments where we didn't know how to paint something. And
right.
This is a pretty learned group. And so somebody would suggest, well, why don't we look at this artist or that artist, and how did they handle this issue or this problem? How do you paint white? How do you paint something to look luminous? And so we would go and we look at these artists and we would emulate them, and we would learn through that emulation and add it to our own, toolkit.
And let's not forget, Michael, you're so right, and that's like a beautiful thing. But then there were other times when, like, Michael would say to me, try a pointed brush instead of a rounded brush. That's a pretty basic thing, but that's also something I learned.
That's the amazing thing about this. One little comment, almost an offhand remark, usually in a joking way, can change the way you think about what you're doing. And
do it. And how
like you say, use a round brush, use a rigger.
Water. Use more water.
Yeah.
Use more water.
So hang on a second, because I think you touch on something that's really, really amazing. And to me, it feels like this is, the way I feel about this conversation. I don't. Sometimes when I do this, and this is just regular Convo by Design, of which I've been doing for 10 years now. And prior to that, I've been doing interviews and recorded conversations for close to 15 years. Oftentimes when I do this, there's kind of this process that I feel like I have to follow, where I want to find a starting point, and then I want to follow the tangents to a logical conclusion at the end. I don't feel the need to do that in this conversation. And it's quite different for me, to be perfectly honest with you. And the reason why is because, like, if I was talking to a room full of designers, more on the creative side, less on the math side, it would having creative conversations about painting and feel and how do you paint white, interesting. I get that. When I'm talking to architects, there's usually a more scientific approach to the conversation. That's just the way it's always been in my experience. What you guys are talking about, though, is something that's really interesting to me because, post-pandemic, I don't know about you guys, I am a different person than I was on Friday the 13th of March 2020. I'm a different person. I think differently about things. I think differently about what I do. I too picked up, it's not a hobby. I picked up a passion. I'm a wood turner. And I turn wood, and I learned how to do that because I was stuck at home drawing and painting, and I wanted something that I could be more expressive with. As you get into this more and more, now that it's not an official, I mean, you guys are an official club, but it's not like the official I know it's funny to make it sound that way, but what has that done for you emotionally? What has it done for you psychologically, considering that the work you do is already creative, but now you have something else, a creative endeavor that you can just be purely passionate about? Does that change the way you think about the nature of creativity?
Yeah,
Yes.
I was in Maine last week, and I was taking a walk through the woods, and I don't think it would have been possible to see nature the way I was seeing it if I hadn't been painting intensively like I had for the last 2 years with these guys. It opens up something within you to be able to see things differently.
Well, you change the way you see dramatically, because I think one of the first things I noticed is you were sitting outside at a sort of a club in the city looking across the lawn at a bunch of spruce trees, and you weren't seeing trees, you were seeing the dark shadows and the light hitting the top branches, and you were no longer, it's almost like learning another language where once you start dreaming in the other language, you're going to be fluent. But in this case, you start looking at things the way you might paint it versus the way you might look at it, which is a completely different set of vocabulary than what we would normally think with.
Yeah.
And it's really quite fascinating because it changes, it teaches you another way how to see. And it may be taking you back to the way you first learned how.
I agree. I think one of the big things about this is seeing things. You literally, I look at things differently from the way I did before we started painting together. I drove from New York City this afternoon up to Rhode Island, where we have a house, and I looked at every tree, or the way the sky hit the trees, or the light in the dark, or the colors, in a way I never have before. And I look at things now, and how would I paint that? And what color? Looking at a chimney right now, I know that chimney is red brick, but what color am I actually seeing? And actually, it's purple on one side and it's yellow on another. So one of the things that I've learned from painting is what do you see versus what do you know? I know it's red brick, but what it really is purple and yellow. That's something that I've learned from painting is not just composition and all that kind of stuff you learn about art, but color. When Michael mentioned how do you paint white, one of the things we've all discovered is there's no white.
No.
White can be purple, it can be yellow, it can be blue, it can be gray, but there's really no white when you're looking at a painting,
especially watercolor.
No, but so Tom, if I can build on, I'm in my office. When you talk about looking at what you see as opposed to what you know, and I think architecture is so often abstracted into drawings that are idealized and simple and orthogonal, so the plans and elevation sections and so on. And there's a tyranny about elevations that seduces architects to think this is what someone's going to look at. But the truth is perspective, light, sunlight, shadow, trees, three-dimensional changes where your body is in precision to the building, makes an enormous difference to really what's going to be successful in composition. And I think since we started painting so much, I think a lot more and refer to that a lot more as I'm working on compositions with architects in my office. Think about what will you actually see as opposed to what you've drawn that's flat.
And I think that's how all architects used to see.
Right.
And used to be able to apply to their work. And I think that's changed since we've moved away from drawing into using computers.
Right. Exactly.
It is a victim. It's certainly been victimized by the digital world versus the hand-drawn world, where you had to make the hand-eye coordination work as well.
Yeah,
we're losing that language, as Steve said.
That's one thing I'm learning. Forget about color composition. Literally, one of the things I've been struggling with, and Josh, if we're getting off the track of what you want to talk about, let us know. But literally, the motor control to get a clean line with a brush and water and color. Literally, how do you look at a building and the landscape or whatever it is, or tree, and have the coordination to get it down? That's one of the things I've been really working hard on. And Michael, I think it's one of the things you're great at. I am astounded sometimes at how Michael can finesse a detail or a window or a roof or something in a landscape. It's really hard.
You know what I'll say to that? And by the way, Tom, I appreciate you the offer to pull back and say, I figured out when I threw out, let's talk about George O'Keeffe in the Grand Canyon. You guys are like, yeah, no, we're not talking about that. Okay, let's talk about roadside attractions. You're like, architect, and you're like, no, we're not talking about that. Okay, what about Hearst Castle? You're like, no, we're not talking about that.
Josh, can you imagine being married to us?
Yeah.
No, I cannot.
That's why we get along really well. Everyone else is done with us.
I have no expectations for this conversation. And by the way, just so you know, for me to go into a conversation like this, as a journalist, to go in and have no expectations,
Very uncomfortable.
No, to the contrary, actually, Michael, it's kind of a privilege because I never get the luxury of this. I'm not worried. Great. I'm not worried about the individuals with whom I'm speaking because you are all immensely qualified and extraordinary at what you do. So I'm not even remotely concerned about that. What I'm actually excited about and really looking forward to, this is one of those conversations where I'm kind of looking forward to going back and rewatching it and re-listening to it because I rarely get the opportunity to do this. The few occasions that I've really had to do this go back to my days working for Playboy when I was the general manager and program director of Playboy Radio.
Hold on 1 second there. How do we get that job? Oh, sorry.
You don't.
It's feely kind of guy in the office.
Gotta sleep with somebody, Tom.
But one of the things that I got to do is, and it was a joy and it was a privilege, is I got to interview all of these jazz musicians for my show. Fantastic. As they were coming in for the Playboy Jazz Festival at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles every year, which is not around anymore. Once half passed, it kind of everything kind of passed with him. But what was really extraordinary is I got to talk to people like Wayne Shorter and Arturo Sandoval and these extraordinary voices in jazz. And I'm going to draw the correlation between architecture and jazz, because I don't know if you guys love jazz the way that I do, but they are extraordinarily similar. Architecture is a language, jazz is a language. Architecture requires a certain amount of improvisation. Jazz requires an extraordinary amount of improvisation. Jazz, you have rules, but you don't always follow them. Architecture, you have rules, but you don't always follow them. And you go back in history and you look at someone like Frank Lloyd Wright. By the way, Frank Lloyd Wright in my opinion, would not be a success today because he would have been canceled prior to ever being able to show what an immense talent he was. Just because of his personality and the things that came out of his mouth and the things that he said, he would have been socially canceled. But under his tutelage, guys like Bruce Goff, I'm in Tulsa. So a guy like Bruce Goff, who I know from his work in LA at LACMA, but you see what he's done here on the Boston Avenue Methodist Church. Oh my gosh, it's extraordinary. So that kind of, and by the way, since I've had a beverage or two, I forgot where I was going with this. But what I will say is that I totally appreciate having this conversation with you guys without any rules, because traditionally, my conversations with architects have always been far more structured. And this is kind of a privilege for me. And I'm wondering if you guys get the same feeling when you're just talking, painting virtually, remotely, via Zoom, hanging out.
It's always interesting where our conversations go, and they range all over the place. Something you just said is really interesting to me is I love when you hear a musician talk about what they do, and it's music, but so much about what music people do is so related to what we do. Artists, painting is so related to architecture, and it really boils down to or writing a novel. It's all about the creative process, and it's amazing how so much, a book is different from a house, but at the base of it, they're all really the same thing. You have an idea, you rough it out, you fiddle over here, you fiddle over there. The story begins to talk to you, and the way the design of the house begins, it begins to set up its own rules. There's a great movie about Isaac Mizrahi from like 25 years ago, and everything he does with his fashion design is exactly what we do with houses and architecture. So, it's all. I don't know, just an incredible thing how all of these things are really related.
I mean, I think building on that, though, it's a great point, Tom. I think this group has allowed us to explore things that we were always interested in, but maybe didn't have the time to do. Or, it was interesting very early on, we would try to say, oh, well, let's study this or let's do that. Or, we went through a period of all painting the same thing, which was very interesting to see how we all approach things differently. And that was, on show very much at the start. And then it sort of drifted into sharing paintings of things we had painted on our own. And it just was very free form, but it also allowed a tremendous exploration. I mean, I know certainly for myself, I really just studied things that, I thought were cool and kind of would bring those along, but I think we all did.
It's a strong margarita you've got there, Doug.
That's the kind of hurtful thing we say to each other.
But okay. So let me say what I was thinking while you guys were talking about.
Wait, Doug, how did you? Doug, I have a question for you, Doug. Doug, I have a quick question for you. How did you get into Yale?
Wow, I'm an artist. Clearly,
they were short.
Learn the art speak.
But beyond that, I mean, we obviously have developed this really tight relationship and this communication and understanding of who we are and what we do. But that's allowed us, even when we get on some of these Zoom calls and we paint, sometimes we say nothing for the entire hour.
Yeah.
Right. But it's almost
it's a hard
in itself,
That is amazing. We will be painting and we won't have said something for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Let me get
We're
this
kind of
straight.
communing together.
Let me get this straight. You guys can go 15 minutes without saying something?
No,
I find that incredibly hard to believe.
No.
Yeah,
It's
full
true.
Zoom meeting, everybody's up on screen. No, actually, even better, you look up at the screen and everyone's like this.
Yeah. You see the top of everybody.
Doug has a little bald spot right here
Oh,
that nobody
male
else
pattern
has.
baldness.
That's hilarious. Okay, on that note, here's what I'm doing. I'm gonna call intermission. I'm not stopping recording. Please carry on the conversation. I'm going to get more ice.
No, I need to get into the drink.
I need
But
more
I'm
ice.
glad you called intermission.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, the rest
yeah.
of us will carry
I'll be
on.
right back because I have
Stop
to go to
recording.
another building to do that. On my vast
Well,
estate.
the estate of Tom Kligerman.
Well,
Gosh,
It's
I'll
interesting.
stay.
so when he's not going to stop recording, it's interesting. I think that great fun, of course. I think that a couple of things that are interesting is how we started all painting different things, sharing our paintings together in that scramble when we were all wondering whether we still have a job, and we were all working at home, and we were just painting whatever we wanted. And we would have critique sessions,
Right.
and then it gelled into the point I wanted to pick up from what Josh said about jazz, and that is we all as architects draw, because we're architects at a certain age, we all draw very well by hand. We can draw exactly what we see, and we can draw what we want. The thing about watercolors is that unpredictability means that, rather like jazz, there is a riff aspect to what's happening when we all get together, and we're all looking for looseness that is separate in our artwork from the precision of our architecture.
I think that's true, Ankie, that as architects, we have a tendency to record and to try to record every single detail. And it's like I did a painting this last weekend and I shared it with the club, and Doug's comment was, "Loosen up, pal."
Just on the rocks, not on the sky.
I had an artist look at some of my watercolors. I mean, 10 years ago, when I was like doing nothing but sketching on vacation, and she said, "You're an illustrator. You're not an artist."
Yeah.
Well, that's really
Good point.
right. I know, bitch. Anyway,
Were you like, wait a minute? No, I'm an architect. I'm not an illustrator. I'm an architect, and
No,
I'm
but
an
I-
artist.
Well,
But
I
I
think
know what she was exactly right, because we are so used to, in our jobs, we're recording either what we want to see built, what we want our clients to imagine, or something that's around us, or we're adding on to a building. You want to draw what's there. And the great thing about watercolor and its unpredictability is there is something that you can't predict that's going to happen. So there's this wild card element, like 5 musicians playing jazz. And that's one of the reasons we moved from all painting different paintings that we shared and critiqued, which was the first, 6 or 8 months. We started thinking, how are we going to loosen up? How are we going to make this happen? We decided if we painted the same thing, speed painting, like we often do when we're sitting in front of a building, you've got half an hour before the tour begins. What are we going to do? You do a quick impression, you throw some color on it, and you're done because you're in a sketchbook. We started painting on Sundays for an hour, hour and a quarter, hour and a half. We'd pick the same subject, we'd launch right in, and we had to be done in an hour, hour and a half.
Well,
And
let's
Yeah.
look at the opposite of that. Sitting in the desert in Santa Fe, and
we did
if you don't finish your painting in 15 minutes, your palette, is it's dry.
Hard.
Right.
Yeah,
But they lead to the same result. They lead to the same result. If you move quickly, you don't have time to obsess. And so you're throwing down an impression, and you're listening to the paint, and you're just letting it happen. And I've learned more by that than anything else, I think, in this club, personally.
Well, and we also had the tradition of being architects and having renderers either in our employ or working with them. And, it's a very tough thing to present a painting to a client that expresses emotion. Like, you can't really do that. Like, you need to be showing them a rendering, an illustration. And
Well, but I disagree with that a little bit, Doug. I like how Tom likened architecture to a book. I think the difference between a book and a movie, a book allows you to live between the lines. And, I think a looser painting allows that as well, as opposed to an illustration. The problem with computer renderings today is you can't live between the lines. It is what it is.
It's
I
You
also
can't
think that-
imagine yourself in that moment.
I think clients are more open to this sort of emotional, interpretive. I think, clients would probably love to see some sort of loose notion. I think we should give them more credit. I think one of the things we tend to do is over control what we show. And I don't know.
You're saying you're controlling, Tom?
Yeah, I believe so.
I love,
I have
by
no
the way,
response.
I love how all of this just comes down to who's going to take the next shot at Tom. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. I don't understand it because I'm such a nice guy. I'm so supportive and loving.
Do you
At
think
least you're smiling now?
Well, there's no question that clients actually like all of that type of thing, because we actually started, whenever you do something, you might do a couple little postcards and then you bring them out and say, well, we think it's going to look like this. We've really noticed now they never even get halfway through the meeting without those disappearing into somebody's purse very quickly, or a book somewhere, and they're never on the table. And you know that they have their Christmas cards or something, or invitations for the next 6 years, because they've all migrated. And that's kind of an interesting shift from what you're really talking about, or it's that feeling. And I think it's appreciated, along with the more detailed work that we've all done over our entire careers, that we think of as more architectural drawings. And I think they're very happy to see that sort of thing. Now, what about?
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No,
finish that thought.
The thought I was gonna move on to is some of the different things we've done of traveling by painting or imitating an artist to learn a technique, and then in some cases donating paintings to help raise money for different events is what I think maybe it'd be interesting to hear what different people within the group have been asked to do, now that there's some recognition that we're doing this. What other guys in the group, what have they got? I keep
it's really scary, Steve. It's
You know.
scary. I was just asked to do a watercolor for the cover of a new book that's coming out.
Mhm.
I
They
feel
must be
totally
desperate.
They clearly are, Ankie. They clearly are,
That came
because
from Ankie.
We're
Wow,
gonna team that
thank you,
one
thank
up
you,
nicely.
thank you.
Huh?
Josh, you're right.
Tom's
See what happens?
ABCs.
No, but that's kind of amazing. I think, people, I don't know, maybe we're better than we think we are. Maybe, there's some mystery. People look at the watercolors and they go, God, how do you do that? Part of me thinks anybody can do it as long as you spend enough time at it. But I felt honored, but also kind of worried and scared about this idea of doing a watercolor for cover of a book.
What's interesting, at least to me. So when you all went to school for architecture, what, if you had to put a percentage on what the curriculum that you went through had to do with feeling, emotion, the artistic nature of what architects do? Did any of that exist?
Oh, absolutely.
0.
Oh, really?
Oh,
You
really?
think?
And it's even
No.
worse today.
No, I think a lot.
No, for me, nothing.
Well, you
It's
went to
even worse
Columbia.
today.
No, I went to Yale architecture.
Well, and I just taught at Yale, and the problem is that they don't even require drawing today.
Yeah, that's a
It's
problem.
not a requirement. And so, to give a student a sketchbook and say, draw that tree, and it's like, well, why draw a tree? Well, do you really understand what a lintel does if you don't understand what a tree is? And so
that's
it's amazing, this process that they go through, and this understanding that they arrive at, and understanding the tectonics of building from understanding the things that your buildings are made of, by observing them, by understanding them. And this isn't something architecture school teaches today. It's all, done on the computer. It's all done on a screen with no scale, there's no emotion.
How about when you started in school, Michael?
What's funny is I took a rendering class and everybody was using markers and I watercolored, and he gave me a B- because I didn't use markers.
Michael, that's better than the C+ we give you.
I love this group, but I asked the question because what I find really interesting is when I talk to designers and they talk about what the curriculum was like in interior design, it's drawing, it's fabrics, it's materials, it's the materiality of things.
They don't understand that today.
There's no business classes that interior designers are exposed to. There's no technical. What's that?
Architects aren't either. There's one.
No, I get that. But Doug, what you are exposed to is the math and science part of the design business, and it's just interesting.
That class.
Well, what I think is interesting is you get the scope and scale and topography, and you get all of these things, but you don't get the, at least from what I understand, you don't get the emotion. I feel strongly that great architecture is emotional, and it's hard to demonstrate that.
Human.
It's what?
It's what makes it human.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's emotional, and that's part of what you do, and that's the artistic nature of architecture.
I love
originally
hearing you say that, because that's part of what we should be doing. And so, it's really stepping out of the comfort zone of proportion and math and elevations and all the rectilinear drawings and stuff like that. But I think one of the lessons of the Whisky Watercolor Club is to really go for feeling and emotion and color and surprises and maybe things being a little out of control. I think it might make for stronger buildings.
And I'm really proud of the fact that since Tom's been painting with the Whisky Watercolor Club, that his architecture's gotten so much better.
I saw that coming a mile away. I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know where it was going to hit, but I knew it was going to hit.
For the rest of this podcast, I'm just going to listen.
No, you're not.
I guarantee you that's not true. I promise you that's not true.
No, that will never happen.
Help me out here. Help
Ankie.
Ankie, please help me.
Where's the mute Tom button?
Oh, that's your help. There's your lifeline.
To say something nice. But it's true. I mean, I think your point. When I think about the great architects, you walk into the staircase of the Laurentian Library, or you look at work by Amanda Branzini, who's not a household name, but is incredibly powerful, emotional architecture. Or a great arts and crafts house. There is an emotion there that those architects were able to bring into their work that I hope that what we're doing here allows us to bring into our work.
Yeah, I think the Whisky Watercolor Club, definitely, all of us were in school in the postmodern era, where traditional architecture and a respect for it was returning to the academy. And we all worked for people who had an education and appreciation for that. And I think we've continued that. The emotion part, I don't know. I feel like when I was in school, it was a very heavily Lou Kahn influenced school. So there was an appreciation for infinity. Yeah. I think that's maybe where the emotion came in, and what does a brick want to do, sort of stuff.
I have a slightly different view and say that, maybe to build on that I don't think I had any teachers at school that focused on the emotional impact of architecture, but we were exposed to a lot of wonderful work by great architects, and like Bruce Goff. I mean, you can mention there's a wide variety of people that we love. The classical architects too, and Renaissance architects. But I think that we all, as a group, individually, reacted emotionally to the works that were most important to us. And I think we've all probably learned personally to react and work as emotionally based architects, just because that's kind of an affinity we have. I never felt there was that environment at school, but it's an absolutely critical part of the success of what we do. And it may be why we're all primarily residential architects, because we're building dreams for clients, yes. And that's where it resonates the most.
And where there's an emotional tie to the client, that they have an opinion as well. and they respond to the emotional side as much as the factual side. So there's truly a relationship, and it's beyond the factual portion. And you really
to relate it to this group, like I've absolutely shared things with this group that I was thinking about in projects, or that I've been able to build on and investigate here in a far more sophisticated way. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, and I think that's true, Doug. I mean, Josh, part of the reason why this group came together is we're all like-minded in that we're hungry to understand more about that emotional quality about architecture. And so that's why we were all drawn to the organizations that we met each other through, which is the Sohn Foundation and Lutyens Trust America, is because we followed those architects that understood that innate quality of architecture. And it's what drives us all within our work, and why we're interested in painting and seeing the world through these artist eyes that allow us to be better architects and understand that human emotion.
I
feel
wonder,
like it
though,
all-
when you look at these architects, did Lutyens think about emotion? Did Michelangelo think about emotion?
He had to have, Tom.
Absolutely.
Do you think
absolutely.
that Palladio thought about emotion? I'm not so sure.
Well, I don't know if they thought about it, but they absolutely recognized the wonder that a person walking through a building experiences as they move through their structure.
I agree with that, Doug.
Yeah, that's good.
They understood how to pack a punch. They knew that when
that's
they know
there
how to
in the
build a
Laurentian
jaw
library. Come on.
You know what I'm gonna say here is, and by the way, I run the risk of sounding incredibly stupid being a journalist amongst architects, and I recognize that, but from my own experience, it's really interesting to me. And Tom, you and I have spoken because I think the second time you and I spoke, you had done a design house. You were doing a design house where you did this Wild Things octagonal room that was absolutely extraordinary to me. And it was because of what you and your team did was to tell this story about a space. And it made me think about years and years ago when I toured the Neutra VDL house in Silver Lake, and to see what Richard Neutra did with this home and Dionne's room, and how the use of water was made to create a nautical environment against Silver Lake, and it was just interesting to me how the whole structure came together and all the stories that were in this one building. And I feel like the idea of storytelling is not prevalent in architecture today the way it has been in the past. And it's funny because I see you guys laughing, and I'm not sure if you're laughing at me or what is happening here. What is happening? But anyway, the idea of this storytelling, and it comes back to the idea of what you're painting. All five of you can be painting the exact same thing, and your stories will all be completely different.
It
and
is
I think
extraordinary how different one of the things we sort of evolved into is, as Ankie or someone said, we started painting different things. We talk about different paintings, and then we started saying, look, we're going to paint the same picture. It is amazing to me how different each of our interpretation of that view is. I sort of wonder, can't we all just paint what we see? But the message is everybody sees something differently.
And there's an emotional filter there.
Yeah. And the other connection to that is when we've been traveling together, which we'd love to do when we can, although we live all over the country. When we travel and paint together, we sit down and we paint the same thing in real life in plein air. And so we are painting the same thing, and we sit and look at it, compare our paintings all the time. And that is so instructive. I think it's one of the things that led us to paint the same thing when we're on Zoom, is that there's an immediacy. There is that learning from what someone else has done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And seeing the differences and the similarities.
And the things you see that are different. I mean, even when Michael and I went out one morning a couple of weeks ago in London, and we sat at different ends of a park bench to paint, and we had completely different views of exactly the same little park structure, because his end, he couldn't see the building behind, and my end, that's all you could see was the building behind it, and it looked like this little thing in front of it all.
And a week ago,
but beyond
Tom and
that,
I were
Steve,
painting in a pub in Ireland. That's the thing, is you've got to paint where you can. So we've started painting on trains, in pubs, in bars, in airplanes. And so, yeah, you can do what you can. And Tom and I were both painting scenes that we'd sketched at Stowe Gardens. And I think Tom was just drinking a stronger drink than I was. I mean, his stuff was wild.
well, Ankie and I literally did watercolors on a train in India, traveling from Chandigarh to New Delhi.
So great.
You know, with the we painted everywhere, but
yeah. What else?
That's extraordinary. I'm curious if two questions. When did you each start painting, and how has that affected or impacted or informs the way that you work as architect?
Michael, you go first.
I started painting earlier. I would say high school. My aunt gave me a watercolor kit, and so I carried that into college. I didn't realize that you could use it in architecture. And it wasn't until later I saw these journals that there were actually watercolor renderings of buildings that were so evocative that I thought, wow, I mean, this applies to architecture as well. I wasn't very disciplined about drawing or painting often enough to get better at it. It was just good enough. And it wasn't until the rigor of painting with this group on a regular basis every Sunday that we really began to, it was more than what I call than driving a Ferrari on ice, where you just, you thought you were in control, but you weren't. It's developing that language, as Steve said, to be able to, know that when you drop a color into another color, the reaction that you're going to get. And it's that practice over time that gets you to understand the medium and how to express yourself. It takes time.
Is that true that you did not do your watercolors professionally that much? For the last, until a few years ago?
Yeah, I started doing renderings, Doug, but not watercolors for the fun of it, if you would.
Okay. That's
and there's a difference. There's a big difference, right?
There's a huge
One's
difference.
Very technical.
There's a huge difference.
And one is very emotional.
I started doing I did do watercolors in college, and they were dreadful things. At least I thought they were. And I didn't gain the confidence. Yeah, they were. And no, believe me, I knew they were.
Drinks now.
Yeah.
Ankie, you're awesome, dude.
Yeah.
All right.
What's amazing is that hanging out with this group has given me the confidence to continue. I don't know why. But no, there was a very interesting, I was at some lecture where he was lecturing, he was speaking about John Soane, and Soane said something like, don't as the architect, you don't necessarily have to be the one to do the amazing watercolor that conveys the idea.
Yeah,
you have to have the idea. What?
Hard Joseph Gandy.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, Gandy is unbelievable.
Where's Joe when
he made Soane possible. Soane didn't have to do it.
We could use him back again.
Exactly.
Wouldn't that be great? I know.
You'd be busy. You'd have to do
Here's
5
what I'm gonna do
every
going
week.
for. I'm just gonna my next project. I'm just gonna hire Michael to render it.
I'm getting there.
You'll get lots of emotion. In fact, I can't wait to see what emotions you get.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you'll be talking to the clients next, Doug. They'll be moving
All
across.
right. So listen, so we're at an hour, and I always like to be respectful of everyone's time. Do you guys have a few extra minutes to hang out a little bit?
Sure.
Sure.
And
yeah.
anyone in a hurry?
I mean, I have a few people I got to talk to, but a few minutes I can do, sure.
Okay. Last topic of conversation here that I just kind of want to explore an idea with you guys for a second. I've been working a lot. I took a course this year through MIT. It was a no-code AI and machine learning course because I'm really, really interested in AI. And what has come to be for me is that I've learned and I've really realized AI does not mean artificial intelligence. Our AI is accumulated intelligence. It really is. There is no God chip, right? So there's no computer that is creating new works. Everything that someone finds via AI is already in the space. Right. So it's not original. It's a derivative. It's a byproduct of something that's already been done. As creatives yourselves, as architects, your work that you have created over the past 20, 30 years of doing what you do, someone can put a prompt into an AI, into a chat GPT or other algorithm, and it will deliver something that is new to them, but it's still a derivative, a byproduct of what you do. The thing that can't be replicated is when you create a one-off watercolor of a project of something that has come out of your mind into the form of watercolor. You have almost created the intellectual property version of a safety room, where someone can't steal that, because if you show a watercolor in an AI version of a project, it's like, oh yeah, they completely stole this and here's where it came from. Does that impact the way you think about the IP version of the projects that you create? Does it affect the way you view the art that you create? How do you feel about all of these new tools that are coming online and what they do to basically usurp the artistry of what an architect does?
It's interesting you say that, because I've had people send me, oh, hey, I designed this building and I asked it to do a watercolor in the style of Michael Limber. And
Really?
I was like, well, and then you dare send it to me?
Was it representative of what you do?
It was oddly like my watercolors, and okay, I know I'm going to get hammered by the crew here, but it wasn't. Yeah.
Wait. Let me set the tea first.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for the prompt.
Kind of like
Hold on.
Michael, go ahead. We're ready.
It was just weird. So, all right.
Go like this.
Say it.
Come on.
I'm done, guys.
That was it?
No, go ahead, Michael. Come on. Don't worry about these guys. I got your back.
Oddly like one of my paintings, but it wasn't good. It wasn't the same.
No, we did the same thing. We had a whole sort of afternoon looking at AI. And one of the things we had all these AI things was to create houses in our style. It was kind of there. It just wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Which gave me hope. But
I think, Josh, your point is a good one. I think that it's said that there are no new ideas, but I think what we're able to do as designers, particularly with a lot of experiences, you can synthesize so many thousands of things that you've seen before that you can you can pick odds and ends from all of them into a composition that becomes unique for this particular situation in a way that luckily with the human brain is still superior to what AI can do. I think that our brains are able to filter emotion, and we have perspective, and we have judgment about, we can prioritize the success of one component over another to create a new composition that's fragments of 1,000 things.
I mean, we're taking in all this information over, say, 50 years, longer in Ankie's case. And processing it through, these emotions and these life experiences, and as Ankie says, these judgments that we have that a machine can't replicate.
Yeah, but what that, I completely agree. But what that misses is the magic of the moment, which is something AI will never do, which is the water from the jar on your brush and the paint, and you just don't know what's going to happen with that paper. I mean, we could have these great conversations about just
to leave out alone,
taking out which press did you use? Cold press, hot press, 140, 300, 90. And there are so many variables and so many different things happen, and AI can never do that.
Yeah.
Josh, it's amazing to me how much we could talk about on this subject. I mean, it's endless. And we get together, and you would think after however long we've been doing this, 5 years, that we would run out of things to talk about. And it is astounding to me how much we talk about, and it's really centered on one conversation, which is watercolor.
I love that, and like I said, I am respectful of your time, gentlemen. I will tell you, this has been one of my favorite conversations in the past 10 years of doing this show, partially because I entered from a place of feeling really, really uncomfortable insofar as not knowing where we were going to go with this. I'm usually kind of a control freak. Tom, you can relate. And
I'm so glad you're piling in on Tom.
The hang of it.
Look at that.
And this was an absolute privilege, and I appreciate all of your time, and I would love to do this again sometime.
Well, Josh, can I, if I may speak for the group, it would be really fun to have you join us for one of our Sunday afternoon watercolor sessions. And you can have a paintbrush if you want, or you can simply be there as an observer, conversationalist, and participant. Just be warned, there might be 20 minutes of silence when you're just sitting there, but it'd be fun to have you in one of our sessions.
Yes.
And you may not record it.
And you may record it.
Can I just say one thing? First of all, I would be absolutely honored. Second of all, what I would love to do is if I could do that and just bring my phone out to the studio, and I can turn some wood. I can just turn some things while you guys are
put it on. You just have to put it on mute.
You can. I have another idea, Josh. You know what you could do? You could pick Josh, you could pick our subject to paint.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh.
You come to us with like 5 options. We'll pick one and we'll paint it, and you can turn your,
And then if we don't like it, Josh,
we'll pick
I have no doubt you'll tell me it sucks and we're not doing it, because that's kind of what you guys have already done.
Yeah.
I get it. No, great deal.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right.
And at the end, everybody will turn it up and show you what they did.
I love it, myself included. Okay,
Hey,
I love it.
Josh,
We're gonna. I'll do that.
Enjoyed this hour with you, but I enjoyed these guys. Spending this time with them as well.
This was fun.
It's always this fun.
It doesn't get better.
No, it doesn't.
This was
Thanks,
awesome,
Josh.
gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for the
you.
time.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to this installment of Drinking About Design, featuring the Whisky Watercolor Club. Thank you, Tom, Ankie, Michael, Douglas, and Steve, for sharing your stories and incredible talents. Thank you for doing this. For notes, drink recipes, and further links to the stories and work you heard about here, check the show notes. Thanks for listening. Cheers.